Okay, let's look now at the migration issues that you've been focusing on. In recent days and weeks, you have been grilling the Home Affairs Secretary looking at this controversial migration amendment. I see the Secretary is defending those changes, essentially, saying it's necessary for the integrity of the system that the government's able to force someone to leave the country when they no longer have a right to be here. What have you learned so far about how many people this legislation would actually this change would apply to? The government's been arguing, of course, that these unprecedented powers really would apply to just a very small number of people.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've had that spin continually from Home Affairs, and we had it from Labor ministers who obviously didn't understand the scope of the legislation. And we got that spin again initially from Home Affairs, but it eventually became clear under questioning that these proposed deportation powers could apply to up to 5,000 people who are on a whole variety of different bridging visas. And then we have Home Affairs simply say, oh, but trust us, we're only going to use it responsibly on a handful. I mean, it was quite remarkable that we had to drag that information out of Home Affairs. They didn't volunteer it. In fact, the initial figure they volunteered was 1,200 people that it would apply to, and it was only on further grilling that they eventually conceded it was in the order of 5,000 people. And to have Home Affairs simply say, trust us, we'll use these powers responsibly and we're not going to tell you who we're going to use them against, I think it shocked me, and I know it shocked other senators.
So now, what is the alternative here, though, if the government can't fine, imprison or deport people who have exhausted their legal options to remain in Australia? What would you want to happen to those people in that scenario?
Well, I think we should understand that thousands of the people who are in the government sites for this have had their asylum claims rejected under a process that Labor acknowledges, and pretty much every academic and informed observer acknowledges, is grossly unfair, this so-called fast-tracking system. I mean, this was a system that was proposing to send people back to Afghanistan just days before the Taliban took over. This is the system that repeatedly rejects Iranian women's claims for asylum based on the fact that they say that Iranian women won't face discrimination from that murderous regime in Iran. That's the system that the Labor government wants to use to then ground these extraordinary powers to threaten people with jail if they don't go back. I think many people, when you look closely at this, many people would be deeply troubled giving those kind of godlike powers to the Immigration Minister, especially given how woefully inadequate the initial explanation was. I mean, they wanted to rush these laws through, if you remember, in 36 hours while they were still warm from the photocopier. And yet, you know, we've found so many problems with them in the course of a brief Senate inquiry.
Yeah, there is still a way to go. We'll be following that closely. Green Senator David Shoebridge, appreciate you making the time for us. Thanks so much.
Good to speak.